those individuals who are part of the business engagement group and also the apprenticeship work groups. Thank you for joining the Career Pathways for Targeted Populations Committee meeting. I think we've got a good agenda set forth. We're going to hear from some great speakers today on apprenticeships, which really pertain to youth, but we have some housekeeping that we need to get done. Because we do, this is not a GoToWebinar, so everybody is not in muted mode right off the bat, so you are able to unmute. So please be mindful of that if you have dogs in the background or other noise, we will have some people presenting. Why don't we go ahead and get into roll call? For our roll call, we are going to do roll call with the CPTP committee only, as this is a CPTP summer quarterly meeting. That's who we need to take quote unquote attendance on. So I am going to go through the list of names alphabetically. If you can unmute yourself and let us know that you're here, that'll be great. And then we'll go from there. For those who have recently joined, if you're not normally part of the CPTP or new or part of the business engagement or apprenticeship committee, we'd love if you would introduce yourself via the chat. Okay. So starting the roll call, Suzette Crenshaw. Okay. Dean Dittmeyer. Molly Dowling. I see that she's on.
Hi, here.
Excellent. Jennifer Foster. David Friedman.
Here.
John Furr. And I apologize if I massacre some people's names, as this is the first time I'm saying some of them, their last names. Laura Gurgley. Deanna Giacometti.
Hi, I'm here.
Excellent. Welcome. Steve Gold. LaDonna Henson.
Hi, I'm here.
Hi, LaDonna. Jeff Horvath. Marcy Johnson. See her.
Hi, I'm here.
Amy Julian. Dan Kuhnert. Mark Lohman.
I am here. Good morning.
Good morning. Todd Lowry. Pat Maher. Mike Massey.
Here.
Thanks, Pat.
And Mike Massey's here. Good morning.
Yep, excellent. Kathy Messenger. Kurt Oldfield.
Good morning.
Good morning. Kathy Nicholson Tosh. Michelle Scott Turvin. Joe Seliglia. Blanche Shoup.
I'm here.
Tyler Strum. Rick Stubblefield. Nina Tagman.
Morning, here.
Good morning. Whitney Thompson. Michelle Velez. Tom Windorf, saw
Here.
him. And Lois Wood.
I'm here.
Excellent. So that completes our roll call. If there's anybody that we missed, if you could briefly unmute those people that are formal members of the CPTP versus just one of the work groups. Perfect. If we can we get approval of the last minutes?
I move we approve the minutes as Tom Wondorf.
Can I
And
get a
this is
second?
Molly. I second Molly Dowling.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
Motion approved. Thank you. So as we know, the CPTP is charged with kind of bringing together the workforce ecosystem, bringing business, our workforce development systems and employers and job seekers all together under one roof. And we're split into 3 different work groups: disability group, youth, opportunity youth, and returning citizens. What we're going to do now is move through each of the work groups to give a brief update. So I'll hand it over to David.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Craig. Hello, everybody. The disability work group is sort of getting up and running. We're well past our second meeting and moving forward. Our focus, as you often, many of you know, is to focus on barriers to employment for adults with disabilities and trying to share ideas and opportunities that and successes that people have had across the state with other organizations. The state might be able to apply those same ideas in other places, with a focus on service integration, career pathways, and making sure that we are creating on-ramps into the career pathways that are suitable and appropriate for people with disabilities. And as I said, through communication and education, continuous improvement of different programs in place throughout the state. Next slide, Molly. The last quarterly meeting was focused on disabilities, and we had Josh Long, the principal at the Southside Occupational Academy, present to us, and very interesting to hear about the programs that they have in place to create transitional jobs and ultimately long-term jobs for students in their transition academy. And now we are working to prioritize. We had sort of brainstormed earlier a list of barriers, and we are prioritizing those barriers to focus on pulling together a webinar in October to feature some of the successes, again, 1 or 2 of the barriers that we identify as being highest priority. And we're open to new members, so whether those are CPTP members or other people here interested in joining us, our next meeting is in July.
Perfect. Thank you, David. Marcy, do you want to update on the youth group?
Yes, absolutely. So I've been blessed with being one of the new co-chairs of the Opportunity Youth Group. And so we are in the beginning stages of this. Our charge for this group is to identify and provide strategies, recommendations, best practices to increase and expand access to career pathways and career opportunities for youth. And I'm excited about this work. I think that the engagement that we're going to have with the secondary piece as well is needed. And so we're going to be looking at 3 areas similar to the other groups: service integration, career pathway awareness, and the continuous improvement. And this is really looking at, finding those opportunities, looking at ways we can fund more opportunities for youth, when we can help with awareness. Remember, it's high skill, high wage, in-demand occupations. And so we're going to be looking at, how we can increase that knowledge across the state. And then just the continuous improvement, how we make sure that all students get access, including those special populations youth, And just working on that communication. And we, you know, in ISB, we collect a lot of data related to the special populations youth, and as well as at the community college level. And so we'll be able to have some data to look at as we think about our direction and the way we want to go. And next slide. And so again, like I said, we're really at the infant stages of this. We got together, we have invited several people to be part of our membership. And we've identified them, they've all agreed. We haven't had anybody say no, which is great. So we sent out a doodle poll to have a meeting coming up in August. And what we'll do is at that time, we'll create a work plan for our group. And we'll be glad to share that at the next meeting with you on an update to keep you informed. And as David said, if there's anybody that maybe who has a real passion for working with the youth and would like to be in this group, we would, you know, we invite you to let us know. So thank you, Craig.
No problem. Thank you. Next, we've got returning citizens. Mark Lohman, do you want to say anything, or do you want me to handle it?
Good morning. We have been reorganizing, or actually just organizing this work group post-pandemic. We have a priority of helping both individuals in custody as well as returning citizens post-release. The business engagement is very key to this. We have been successful pre-pandemic and even currently with businesses that are hiring, and in some cases that term business can be used very broadly, because we've also had engagement of government and not-for-profit organizations, and even one community college that I'm aware of that has hired a returning citizen. So we are very much going to be focused on business engagement and business services. We would really like business people to be part of this work group. And actually that can be business people who are already hiring and training justice involved individuals, but it can also be business people that want to learn more about it, even if perhaps they have not yet been hiring in that population. We are focused on occupational training and work-based learning. We have recently worked with the Illinois Department of Corrections and have started to place individuals in a manufacturing firm as well as a construction company. And those are people who are in custody but have the privilege of day release and can go to their work during the day and participate on an on-the-job training contract and earn wages that are above minimum wage, and that is money that they can earn and retain. We're also focused on career services with career planners in Title I and an employment service with specialists in Title III. We are definitely recruiting. We already have had good participation from various agencies, and we want to expand that to make sure that we are statewide. The Illinois Department of Corrections is very engaged with us, as well as the Illinois Department of Commerce and Illinois Department of Employment Security and the Vocational Rehabilitation Bureau of the Illinois Department of Human Services. We have not-for-profit community action agencies that are engaged, through the Community Services Block Grant. And of course, we have community colleges and other training providers who are engaged. And so this work group is interested in you, whether you're a member of the Career Pathways for Targeted Populations Committee or not. I will put my contact information in the chat, and I see Molly already put hers in there. And so we are recruiting, and our tentative schedule is to have a meeting the last week of July or the first week of August.
And then with that, Mark, we're also planning our next quarterly meeting as well, correct? To feature Kiwani life skills reentry.
Yes, and
Yep.
that will be an opportunity for those of you who want to attend in person and have a tour. And of course, there will also be portions of the meeting that will be virtual, audio, video.
Yep.
As usual.
So we will be getting information out on that meeting and looking to see, it's a great opportunity to have a hybrid meeting and see, some of this work live in action, right? And some of the great things that are happening within some of our systems. Prior to moving on, one of the things that hopefully everybody will see, and we'll have those formal charges and priorities for this group. As Mark said, we're continuing to redevelop and push that out. But we see that each group, we're following the same architecture of service integration, career pathway awareness, and continuous improvement. So we're really trying to drive synergy throughout the system to make sure that we're all focused in the same direction. And the interesting thing as we talk as co-leaders is how these groups kind of overlay with people. As Mark has commented frequently, and David has commented how many returning citizens have disabilities, or the number of returning citizens that are youth, right? So there's a lot of overlap, and we'll look to share those best practices where appropriate. So thank you for those good updates, and we look forward to the progress that we make in these different areas. Without further ado, the next part is for us to get into the main part of our presentation on Chicago Apprenticeship Network. I invite Tom Windorf to do the introductions for me, please.
Thank you very much, Craig. It's really my pleasure to introduce the Chicago Apprenticeship Network to you all. The Chicago Apprenticeship Network had its beginning in 2017. And I believe it's one of the most important new workforce initiatives in the entire country. The CEOs of Zurich and Accenture were friends in their civic work in their business sectors in Chicago. They began to discuss the problems with recruiting, training, and retaining four-year college graduates for their companies. Zurich and Accenture are worldwide powerhouses in the financial services sector. The breakthrough for them came from asking themselves one simple question: do all entry-level positions at our companies require a four-year college degree to be successful? Their answer was, well, maybe not. That formed the core idea for starting the Chicago Apprenticeship Network pilot. This partnership, in my opinion, is a prime example of what business sectors working together with innovative leaders can accomplish. They adopted the work-based planning model that we call apprenticeships. They wanted to find out if entry-level, mid-skilled jobs could be successfully filled using an apprenticeship model. These new employee apprentices would learn their job while earning an income. I first learned the Chicago Apprenticeship Network in 2018 when I met Dan Serrata at A&M. Many of you know Dan, he's a member of this committee. Their idea was new, exciting, innovative, and intriguing. It appeared to have significant possibilities for scalability and sustainability. This apprenticeship model has proven to have explosive growth. It is benefiting both the people entering the program and the businesses employing them, a true win-win. Now I'd like to introduce the three people that are going to tell you about the Chicago Apprenticeship Network. The first is Michael Chiappetta. He's an Accenture Director, Midwest Business and Operations and the Chicago market development. He has 20 plus years working with Accenture since graduating from the University of Illinois. He's a Chicago native. His role at Accenture is to expand Accenture's footprint in Chicago and beyond. Partnering with Aon and Zurich, he helped establish the Chicago Apprenticeship Network, bringing city colleges' tech-focused students into apprenticeship roles across the business needs in their companies, technology, finance, digital, and HR sectors. Michael has had a distinguished career at Accenture and is serving many different roles. Next, I'm going to introduce Shanae Robinson. She's the Public Affairs Manager, Global Ecosystem and Apprenticeship Program. Shay has been in a role at Aon, helping to grow the Chicago Apprenticeship Network and other city network extension efforts since 2021 February. She also serves as a peer advisor for the Obama Foundation. She's a member of the Civic Advisory Council in the City Clerk's Office in Chicago, and she's a former chief of staff of the Cook County government. She is truly an exceptionally gifted young woman. At Chicago Apprenticeship Network, Shay is responsible for strategy and program execution associated with the U.S. National Apprenticeship Program. She also manages the relationships with local leaders, community colleges, and the nonprofit community. She's helping to create broad ecosystem for the Chicago Apprenticeship Network. And finally, we have Susanna Hernandez. She's one of the many success stories for the Chicago Apprenticeship Network. Susanna is a working apprentice for Aon. She went to school at Harold Washington College within the City Colleges of Chicago, and she will describe her journey as an apprentice at Aon. Michael, take it away.
Wow, Tom, that was a wonderful introduction. And if you're looking for a part-time job, you could be a spokesman for the Chicago Apprentice Network. It was a great overview. Good morning, everybody. I hope everybody's having a great day. An honor to talk to all of you about the apprentice program at Accenture. So Shay and I are going to do a little tag team. I'm going to give a quick overview of the Accenture Apprentice Program. Shay is going to talk about the Aon Apprentice Program, and then we're happy to have Susanna to share her story about starting as an Aon apprentice and the experiences that she's had from there. And then we're going to go back to talking about the network, and we'll talk about the difference between the program of the apprentice program and the network we built to try to build awareness and excitement about more apprenticeships across the state of Illinois, and then expanding into 7 other markets across the US and more to come from there. So we'll go quick as we go through this. If anybody has any questions, throw them in the chat. We're happy to make this informal as we go through things, and we'll roll from there. Does that sound good? All right. So I'll start off with an Accenture overview, and Shay, wonderful to see you. I'll start off with the overview of the Accenture Apprentice Program. So I believe that talent is equally distributed and opportunity is not. The apprentice program that Accenture, Aon, Zurich, and others have built helps to more equally distribute that opportunity across more people in more communities in every zip code in the Chicagoland area, across the state of Illinois, and across the US. So our program at Accenture started as a pilot back in 2016, where we started with 5 apprentices from city colleges and an idea that totally shattered our philosophy of only recruiting from top universities, top GPAs for all entry-level candidates. We had a few folks that would go through a program called Year Up that were interns. So they had a high school degree, 6 months of training at Year Up, 6 months of an internship at Accenture. And some of those folks that we would bring in for an internship which was really an opportunity to learn skills, but not a viable recruiting pipeline for us, turned into a viable recruiting pipeline in a very small window. And that was maybe 2 or 3 folks converted into full-time employees and started to flourish from there. So a few of us said, how can we take that small sample size and scale it? And that's where we came up with the idea of building a bridge from Accenture into the community colleges in Illinois, specifically starting with the city colleges of Chicago, where we would take folks that were finishing their associate's degree, focused in tech, and give them something bigger than an internship. It's a full-time pay and benefits program for 1 year. And at the end of that 1 year, the plan is to close that skill gap from somebody with an associate's degree to somebody that can continue full-time after the apprenticeship was over. I'll tell you that our HR team's heads were about to explode when we were coming up with this idea, because it was, well, why are we recruiting at city colleges? There's so many wonderful universities all within 250 miles of the city of Chicago. And it was, let's try this. And we started by convincing folks all the way up at the top. We started with our global CEO, Julie Sweet, who at the time was our North America CEO back in 2016. And then we convinced our global CIO as well. They cleared the payroll for 5 apprentices to start, and we were off and running from there. So we started in 2016 with 5 apprentices. Now I'll give you a set of numbers here: 5, 250, 800, 2,000, and 8. 8 is separate. So the 5 was the pilot that we had back in 2016. Of those 5 folks, they all completed the program, they all graduated, and we continued to scale from there. And the scaling looked like year over year, 5, 8, 27, 45, and it continued to go from there, the number of apprenticeships that we created. By the end of 2022, Accenture just in Chicago will have brought on 250 apprentices in the Chicagoland area, starting with the city colleges of Chicago, expanding to 5 other community colleges and 7 nonprofits as we're going through that. So 5 to 250 and continuing to grow from there. The next number is 800. So we made a commitment in January of this year that we will bring on 20% of our entry-level hires in the US will be through the Apprentice Program. So community colleges, nonprofits, et cetera, as our hiring base. 20% of our entry-level hiring is 800 apprentices. So in 2022 alone, we'll bring on 800 apprentices across 35 markets in the US. The 2,000 number will be the total number by the end of 2022 that we brought on to Accenture overall across those 35 markets. Now, the one to throw in there as well is 90%. 90% of everybody that's gone through our program across the board in all 35 markets complete the 1-year program, convert into full-time employees, and retention is like 94% of folks that go through our apprentice program. Now, probably the one that I'm most proud of and most shocked at, I really had to take a look at the data off of there, is 8. So when we started the program in 2016, we took a look at every educational institution we recruited from in Chicago. And this is talking University of Illinois, my alumni, Northwestern, University of Chicago, Notre Dame, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And city colleges is number 8 in our recruiting of people into our Chicago office, beating Notre Dame, University of Wisconsin, and University of Chicago. That's amazing. So how we made this work, it started off as a corporate social responsibility that turned into a viable recruiting pipeline. And the way we ended up making this work is we ended up effectively taking our entry-level role and splitting it into 2. So here's the way that you could think about that. If you only used to recruit from top universities, top GPAs, it's taking a look at 2 different things. Your attrition level of those highly educated candidates in your entry-level roles over the first year. Where is attrition the highest? And if you can couple it with the volume of your entry-level hires is the highest, that's X marks the spot where there's an opportunity for an apprenticeship. The other way to take a look at it, because the theory is if people are leaving the company in the first year, they're either doing one of 2 things. There's terrible management within your company, which you hope that's not the case, or B, they're not challenged enough. because they're not getting enough opportunities to grow and scale. They're doing things that they're getting bored with. That's the second thing that you could take a look at. You take a good look at the responsibilities that you tie to your entry-level role and figure out which of those responsibilities is your entry-level candidate overqualified for. So think from like a technology point of view, which is the bulk of our apprenticeships. Basic break fix testing, basic design, basic anything for somebody with a University of Illinois engineering degree to do, they're going to get bored. And I think that that's the opportunity when you take a look at the responsibilities that your highly educated candidate is overqualified for. If it's 10% or 20%, you remove those from your highly educated candidate. And then over the aggregate of your recruiting supply, let's say you have 100 people, that's 10 to 20 apprenticeships that you can create and give an opportunity to somebody that has a lower skill level to build those skills in the activities that your highly educated resource does not want to do. Now, the apprentice program is not for everybody. It's for folks that don't have the means to get a 4-year degree. So if somebody is going through city colleges and it's 50% of the folks that graduate go on to get a 4-year degree, we don't want to see them in the apprentice program. This is for people that don't have the means to get a 4-year degree. Either they don't have the resources, time, or they just need to start earning some money. This is creating another avenue for recruiting to effectively create the middle skill job that's been eroding in the US for years, and more so in Chicago than across the US. So the standard starting salaries are between $40,000 and $50,000 a year. And with that high conversion rate and completion rate and upward mobility, it's an incredibly talented, viable talent strategy. And I think the second piece of this is that it balances social inequities. Inequities that are built into a system to not allow everybody in the community a similar opportunity. And that has been exacerbated over the years. As a University of Illinois grad, an engineering degree, it was $9,000 a year with room and board for a University of Illinois engineering degree. And I didn't graduate in 1959. I graduated in 1999. $9,000 a year. For those that have kids, I have a 3- and 5-year-old. I'd pay that right now if I could lock that in, because it's $34,000 a year for just tuition and $50,000 if you throw in room and board. So if you think of Chicago, you think of the south and west side of Chicago. If I were to tell somebody on the south side of Chicago going through the Chicago public schools, great news, you can get a job at Accenture or Aon. You just need to endure $100,000 to $200,000 of financial debt and get a good GPA to get an entry-level job. They're going to say thanks, but no thanks. What we're offering now is city colleges is $4,500 a year if you don't get any financial aid or student loans. That lowers the hurdle that somebody needs to clear. And in Chicago, if you get a B average in CPS, city colleges is free. So that creates so many more opportunities for so many people in the community. And the stat that I love, sorry to throw all the stats at you, is we have 6,400 people in our Chicago office. Half live in the city of Chicago, half live outside of Chicago. Of the half that live in the city of Chicago, only 10% of those employees that are not apprentices, 10% live on the south and west side of the city. The percentage of the 250 folks we brought on to Accenture, 40% live on the south and west side of the city, equally distributing opportunity to everywhere in the community. So that's the overview of the Accenture program. I'm happy to flip it over to my good friend Shay to talk about the Aon program.
Well, I think that Mike, I think you were talking about Tom earlier, but Mike is like the godfather of this. So every time he goes before me, I take the easy part of it. So thank you, Mike. So I think Mike gave a good foundation to, I think, both of our programs and why they decided to launch. I mean, Mike and Dan were the foundational partners of this, and I had the pleasure of joining in, once everything was up and running. So I'll give an overview of just Aon's program, and then I'll turn it over to our apprentice to actually explain about the program. So Aon has a 2-year program, and we combine education and work experience. It's a holistic 2-year program where apprentices are paid for full-time jobs while getting their associate's degree, so the earn and learn model. It allows apprentices to build their network of individuals from nonprofit partners and collaborative corporate firms. And as an Aon apprentice, you receive paid tuition, books, and fees for your two-year associate's degree and start your career at the same time to develop vital workplace skills and earn a full-time salary while you learn. I think Mike said it a little bit earlier. If that was offered to me, I would have definitely taken this route rather than the student loan debt route to pretty much end up in the same place. And so on top of those benefits listed, Aon apprentices receive all of Aon's benefits, and we are DOL certified program, and Aon works closely with, and I think that Mike mentioned it too, with our local community colleges in each city to build a curriculum that allows apprentices to complete their studies and apply what they're learning to real world experience, which I think is another thing. Mike, you said you're an engineer, and then it's like, hey, I have an MBA over here. It's like, did I need that to get into the role that I'm in now? And I think the only other part that I'd point out, after successful completion of our two-year program, apprentices are offered a permanent role within the organization, which I think is vital to an apprenticeship program. Is the placement after the career track. And qualifications for the program, you just have to have a high school diploma or equivalent, contingent that a candidate is accepted and deemed college ready. So they take the college ready course by the city college at the start of the program, and then the minimum age of 18, and there's no max, no cap, which I think is also great. And so I'll leave the questions for the end, but I do want you guys to be able to hear from Susanna Hernandez. She's a December 2018 apprentice graduate, now working as a senior accountant with Aon's Consolidation Group. So Susanna, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Shay. Hi, everyone. My name is Susanna Hernandez. I was an apprentice that started back in January of 2017. So I was part of the first cohort at Aon. I started with Aon because I really wanted an entryway towards corporate world. I always really wanted to go into accounting, but I didn't know how to get there. And Aon seemed like a really great program to start. So what is with the apprentice program is that it's a 2-year program at Aon, and they offer 40-hour work and school schedule. So what it is that you work about 25 hours of work hours, and then the rest of the hours are school hours. And you get paid as a full-time employee as well. That's something that I saw as a great opportunity, because before Aon, I did go to school full-time and I worked full-time. So I rarely had any time off for me, because my time off would be studying. So Aon was a great opportunity for me to, find a career path and make it, just like I said, find my way to the doors. So I started at Aon in the North America Risk Office, which they had an entry level for an operations specialist. Pretty much take care of read over contracts, do review of third parties that came in. So it was a great work because I got to learn a lot about Aon. And Aon's a very big company. So that was for me, I felt like it was a great start. So during the program, we all took classes together. So we, as a cohort, we all became pretty close because we all were able to help each other and all were able to share our experiences as well. So when the program ended in December of 2018, I was really open to my managers and everyone who helped me at Aon that I wanted to continue studying to finish my accounting career. So I went ahead and went to Roosevelt University after the program. I still was working at Aon, and they were very flexible with my schedule as well, because they saw that my potential with being able to continue. So they gave me the opportunity to advance and get my bachelor's degree. So I finished my bachelor's degree in December of 2021. So I recently just finished my bachelor's in accounting at Roosevelt University. So with that being said, I'm now currently working at Aon's consolidation group in finance. So my role is looking at the balance sheet at Aon and putting numbers together. So that's just a brief description of what Aon's program has done to me.
It's amazing, Susanna. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, and to be honest, I think Shay and myself, I consider us pretty good spokespeople for the apprentice program and the network, but the stories of the apprentices and the graduates and the stories of where they started, what they learned, and where you go from there is really inspiring. And thank you, Susanna, for continuing to bust the doors open and blaze a trail for more folks coming through city colleges and other call it non-traditional recruiting sources, which we're working to make traditional.
Yes.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so anything else, Shay, on the Aon side? If not, I'll flip to the Chicago Apprentice Network, and then we'll go to the U.S. expansion.
No, I know where to cut my losses. I think Susanna kind of after that. I'll let you go on.
Awesome. And one of the things I was thinking about when Susanna was talking is another way to take a look at why an apprentice program works is, so I got an engineering degree and then I got a business master, an MBA, and then I went into technology consulting for 14 years and then into a couple of various roles from there at Accenture. So if I think of what did I know coming out of college that I directly applied into my first year or first couple of years at Accenture, and it was probably 20%, right? I think the one thing that I learned in college was to take a bunch of unorganized information, organize it, apply it, and solve problems. That's all I do every day in my job. But like the actual things that I learned, specific lesson plans or anything else that I learned, you learn on the job. Now, if you're an accountant, if you're an astronaut, if you're a doctor, there's a lot of things that you apply from what you learn directly over. But when you go into something a little bit more general, like technology or business in general, there's so much more that you learn on the job. And that's the other eye-opening thing of, thinking about what you coming out of your education did directly to be productive on day one or month 6 versus what you learned on the job. And what you end up finding is there's so much that you learn on the job that as long as you have a solid foundation of a bridge and an on-ramp, an apprentice coming out of community colleges might not hit the ground sprinting like a University of Chicago graduate, but they pick up speed pretty fast and they're often running within 3-6 months, very productive folks that you could shape and mold into incredible employees like Susanna. So the Chicago Apprentice Network.
Loyalty.
Tom mentioned it launched in September of 2017. That was effectively, Julie Sweet, our global CEO, Greg Case, our Aon's global CEO, and then Zurich's CEO, looking to figure out, they were all doing things incredibly well in building out apprentice programs for Accenture, Aon, and Zurich. And it was, how can we do more? So then it was basically, that was the seed that was planted through the Business Roundtable in DC of how can we as companies get more companies, build awareness and excitement about apprentice programs and get more companies to follow suit. So the way that we did that is we launched in 2017, in September of 2017, and said, we are going to work together with the employers in the Chicagoland and Illinois area to build 1,000 apprenticeships by the end of 2020. COVID slowed us by 41 days. We hit it in February of 2021, where we now have, that's when we hit 1,000 apprenticeships created. Right now we have 78 employers and 1,400 apprenticeships that we've created to date. And we're at a clip of about 400 or 500 apprenticeships being created per year going forward. So how do we do it? So we worked and started to build out successful examples of apprentice programs by every major job function and industry. Currently, we've covered 18 industries in the Chicagoland area, and it's supported by the infrastructure of community colleges, nonprofits, and other educational institutions. So it's building awareness and excitement with folks that are decision makers that can make the decision to say, I'm going to allocate X amount of payroll to try this out. And then we connect them to educational institutions, and then they can select and say, if you want to do a technology apprentice program, Accenture has a great program. And you know what? 14 employers have copied our program exactly. We've given them the roles and responsibilities. We've told them how much we pay, the benefits, what things we train folks on. And sometimes we even partner with our clients to help them build an apprentice program as well, where it's, we'll bring on apprentices, you bring on apprentices, we'll all be on the same team together, and we'll all train each other together, and they'll be badged client and badged Accenture, and we'll all build these opportunities going forward. And it's continued to work extremely well from there. And I think when you start to peel back the onion on this, the curriculums that are at community colleges are pretty strong. Once you get past the preconceived notion that you need to have skills A, B, C, D, E, F, G, all the way to Z in order to walk into the door. Guess what? You only need A through K. And that is at almost every community colleges and a lot of nonprofits. And if you go back to that mindset of get somebody who's hungry, get somebody who has a good foundation of education and willing to learn more, then you can fill in all the rest of those skills off of there. And community colleges have very strong curriculums. When we looked at city colleges curriculum, especially in the tracks that they have, now they have two different tracks off of there. The track that you're going to transfer to a four-year degree. And if you think of your four-year degree education, the first year and a half was a bunch of gen ed courses. And then the second semester, sophomore year, you got into the meat of your major. Junior and senior year, you were off and running. There's another path now. And the path is called College to Careers through city colleges, where it focuses more on what skills you want to learn in your first 2 years, stackable credentials that you can use to get a job coming out with an associate's degree. And that's an important distinction, because when we took a look at the folks that are going through that track, there is a lot of skills that people had that ticked a lot of boxes. And a lot of community colleges are starting to build those separate pathways off of there that you can reskill or come out of high school and get the skills that you need to get a job and be productive in the market. And I think that this is a call to action for employers to open your recruiting pipeline, leverage the examples that are there, and then use the biggest asset that you have as an employer, payroll. Create the jobs that have been proven off of incredible examples, and that's how more opportunities get created. And what I found is it takes a lot to break the paradigm or the mold that somebody has of, I only recruit from Northwestern engineering degrees, and that's it. Because the recruiter is never going to get fired for bringing on the best of talent. But you need to look at an inclusive, holistic model. How long are those folks staying? Are they continuing to have upward mobility and continuing to stay at the company, or are they staying for 3 months, getting bored and leaving? That's what we need to do. And it's not to shut down the recruiting pipeline at Northwestern and University of Illinois and others. It's augmented. So you have two different entry-level roles, apprenticeships for community colleges and nonprofits, and then your four-year degree. And the one stat that I didn't throw out there is across the 2,000 folks we'll have brought on by 2022, 65% of them are ethnically diverse and 25% are military veterans and or spouses, which are all of the diversity metrics that every employer is trying to get. And here's a tip. If you try to do that from folks coming out of Northwestern and University of Chicago, good luck. Everybody is looking for folks that are diverse and military veterans with with a high education. So the Chicago Apprentice Network, again, building awareness and excitement that apprentice programs are a viable talent strategy. And we work with employers, we work with educational institutions, nonprofits, and honestly, anybody who will listen to us The key are decision makers, to bend the ear of the decision makers, to open their recruiting doors wider and use their biggest asset of payroll to create real opportunities that build the middle skill jobs back in the US and continue to go from there. So I'll flip it over to Shay to talk to about where we went to after we had a bunch of success in Chicago, because we didn't just stop there.
No, and I didn't mention this, but Mike also want you to talk about Accenture's latest news. So our CEO, Greg Case, made a $30 million investment and commitment to obtain 10,000 apprenticeships by 2030. And Mike, you guys just had an announcement this year too about your expansion, correct?
Well, we did 20% of entry level hires back in January.
Yeah.
That was our big news. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that speaks to the work that they did at a foundational level. And I think that we are seeing huge success in our other cities. So Northern California, DC, Minnesota, Philadelphia, Houston, Detroit. And I'll go back a little bit. So Chicago, we launched in September of 2017, DC, and this was a busy summer. And I think they tricked me coming into this role because I think I was in the thick of all of the launches. So DC, we did that in April 2021, California, April 2021, Minnesota, June 2021, Houston, August 2021, Massachusetts, where Accenture leads there, which I think is phenomenal, March of 2022. And I think that Mike said it a little bit earlier, but these are employer-led with NPO/workforce or educational partners as our sustainability partners to maintain the communication between the network and support the growth, which I think have been vital with how we've been able to sustain city colleges. I think has been the model in how we try to replicate the growth since they do provide the talent and are local. And Mike, anything you want to add to the expansion piece?
No, I think we leveraged the similar model that we had in Chicago, but every landscape in every market was different. And I think like the magic of the network is we're not creating anything that's shockingly new. It's changing people's mindsets and then connecting those dots and creating bridges to existing infrastructure that's underutilized. I think if you start to do something on a blank sheet of paper and try to create it all from scratch, I think you're missing an opportunity to be more effective and efficient in the way that you build it. And I think that's really the key that's come out of it.
Yeah, and it's like having a big sister, a big brother. It's like you got all the scrapes and bruises. Let me learn from your lesson.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, I think that was a major piece for the expansion.
Yeah, and we're not done yet. There's still like 3 or 4 markets that we're kicking around to try to launch in 2022 and continue to go from there. And I think it's just continuing to try to make this business as usual. And I will say that, you know, at Accenture, we are 100% business as usual. We have our HR teams involved. When we first started this, it was a special project. Everything was specific to just the apprentice. And we had separate recruiting, we had separate onboarding, we had separate training, we had separate everything. And we took a look at after the first cohort and said, out of the 20 steps from, you know, recruiting to being productive, what truly needs to be different? And the only 3 things we came up with that were different were there needed to be an additional boost of training for apprentices coming out of the normal training that we go through for a couple of weeks. And it was really specific around, you know, soft skills, which is honestly the easiest thing to fix, of how to craft good emails, how to create strong deliverables, how to work in a team environment. And, you know, I think this is shattering so many different myths. You know, like I remember when I was interviewing for jobs, it was, you never get a chance to make you never get a second chance to make a first impression. Boy, is that dumb. You want to know why? Because the soft skill of like shaking somebody's hand or making good eye contact or having confidence in what you're saying is so easy to fix. And if somebody comes up and their tie isn't perfectly tied, who gives a damn? These are things that are so easy to fix that we're like, that's the way we always used to do this. if somebody is excited to learn and has a decent background on skills, come on board. That's the way we're doing things now. So additional boost of training, we create a buddy system. Sorry if I was a little vulgar in there, but I get passionate sometimes in this. We create a buddy system, which is an apprentice that's in the class above is kind of like your buddy of somebody that you can ask a dumb question to without any judgment. And honestly, I'm 45. I could use that every day. And then we do more formal feedback. So we normally do feedback once a year. You're told to do it more frequently, but you're not enforced to do it. With the apprentices over the year-long program, there's forced formal feedback at each quarter so that you give feedback, give somebody an opportunity to hear that feedback, a chance and a plan to fix it, and then you end up getting higher conversion and completion rates at the end of it. I think that's all. I mean, Shane and I can keep going for what's that?
Yeah, all day. I think, and the networks are free.
So Mike, I think
keep going for a couple of hours, but
we appreciate that, and I can tell you, being an HR professional in the business world, you know, the retention numbers that you talked about. I saw somebody when you were giving the stats say, you know, what amazing numbers, right? And that really tells the story. We do have some Q&A, and then we have some specific questions for the whole group afterwards. Some things that I thought were interesting is, and we will get the presentation out to everyone. On that presentation are links to the Accenture Apprentice Program, Aon's Apprentice Program, and Chicago Apprenticeship Network. You know, some of the key things there is it had Accenture's playbook, right? Where
that's the Chicago Apprentice Network playbook.
Okay, so that's the Chicago Network playbook. Okay, off of yours. Okay, so because I say we published the national playbook, right? But it sounds like, Mike, you share the structure and how you went about it. Can you share, you know, because when I went to the Chicago Apprentice Network, you know, some people might have trouble, as you said, breaking that paradigm and saying, okay, but we're not Accenture, where you're hiring, it sounds, thousands of people. Same thing with you, Shay. When I look at the Chicago Apprenticeship Network, I see companies like this Allison Auto Painting and Body Works, another certified auto body company. So it's not necessarily big Accenture and Aon, but it's those small to mid-sized businesses. What do you see as that range, or maybe you can talk to maybe that small to mid-sized company, how you have helped them make this transformation? Because not everybody has a Shay or a Michael that can run and drive all this. That small business owner that you're talking to convince, they might be the HR manager and the payroll manager and the recruiter. So maybe you could tell a little bit of that story for the group.
Yeah, I'm happy to. And first off, I saw Paul Thompson jumped in here, and I have to give a shout out to Paul, because Paul was the dean of Harold Washington College back in the day, and he actually architected Aon's apprentice program. And then he and Aon and Accenture, along with City College's folks on his team, while he was there, helped to build and shape the Chicago Apprentice Network and the apprentice programs being built at City College. So if we talk about like the founding fathers and mothers of the apprentice program in Chicago Apprentice Network, Paul's face would be in that Mount Apprenticeship when we build that. So thank you. There you go. Thank you, Paul. Okay, so is this a program that's only for big companies? The answer is no. It's a great point, and thank you for bringing that up, Craig. So out of the 78 employers and 1,400 apprenticeships, 80%, sorry, I'm a numbers guy, 80% of the total apprenticeships are at 10 to 12 companies within the Chicago Apprentice Network, leaving 60 something, public math is dangerous, I'll say something, 60 something left that are in the apprentice program. Those are either companies that are starting with a pilot that's small, like what we did, or they're small to mid-sized companies. And I think the model, so the model that Shay has is, you know, a really strong model that builds incredible talent from starting your first year at community college and over the 2-year apprentice program. But that is a lot to commit to for a small to mid-sized company. I think our model is effectively taking somebody that has finished their associate's degree. So if you think of what you need to change within your system for recruiting, you just need to add, it's like adding another college to your recruiting system. You get your stack of resumes, and then those additional 3 things that I talked about, it's adding those in as well. So instead of getting somebody from, you know, Bradley University with a 4-year degree, it's getting somebody from city colleges with a 2-year degree. It shouldn't be that much different in the way that you end up actually doing it. You bring somebody on, you match them to the roles and responsibilities, and you're off and running from there. So it seems like this gigantic leap of faith, but in the model that we have, it's not that different from your traditional recruiting as you're going through from 4-year degree to 2-year degree. Now there's the changes in terms of this person coming out of community colleges might not have all the skills that are there in a 4-year degree candidate. And that is for sure. But I think that when you match the responsibilities properly and you give the proper feedback and you give the proper coaching, it gives that person the opportunity to continue to learn, thrive, and build. And we've found so many companies have gone through and created an apprentice program for 1 person or 2 people in a small organization and continue to go forward from there. And there was a program through the Chamber of Commerce in 2019 and 2020 where they got a grant from the state of Illinois to subsidize half of the costs of an apprenticeship for a year, which is effectively taking a city college's graduate, pay them $45,000 per year, and half of that salary was covered in this grant. It was an incredible opportunity because it probably built 30 companies, 35 companies, and 60 apprenticeships, but it got the toe in the water for small to mid-sized companies that had less than $1 billion of revenue and allowed them to subsidize a pilot. And then what we found with those companies, you subsidize that pilot and then they continue to do it going forward. What I found is it's hardest to get people to not just dip your toe in the water, but just do a full cannonball into the water. Try 1 or 2. And if you try it, there's a really good possibility you're going to see success, and then you're going to continue to go forward from there.
So what does that conversation start with, right? Because again, when you're talking to that small to mid-size, right, it's easy to say. It's like everything else, right? We say, hey, it's really easy to say, it's really hard to do, right? So what's that conversation sound like, you know, as we look at who's on the call today, right? We're all interacting and we have to have those conversations with those business members to talk about this opportunity. So, you know, what are some of those words or tips that we can get from you to have that starting conversation?
Yeah, I think the key is built, like the more that we can get people to build a little bit of a buzz, not completely sell a company on the apprentice program. And the little bit of a buzz is, I just heard this great story from Accenture and Aon and Zurich and the Chicago Apprentice Network, viable talent strategy, balances social inequities, you know, incredible retention rates and conversion rates for entry-level jobs. That's a new talent strategy. That's it. And then it's, oh, well, okay, now go to the chicagoapprenticenetwork.org and connect them to Shanae and myself. I probably had conversations with 400 employers since 2017. I could roll out of bed and give the story that I just gave. My wife could probably give the story because she's in the other room and she's heard it about 400 times. So I think it's connecting to like Shanae and myself and others that can help and, you know, a decision maker have that conversation. And then honestly, it's taking the baton and handing it over to the community college that's close. If the company is based in the Chicago area, City Colleges is amazing. If it's in the northern suburbs, CLC is amazing. If it's in the northwest suburbs, Harper's amazing. And we continue to go forward from there, including a couple of community colleges in central Illinois. So I think it's getting the decision maker excited about it in a very quick conversation. And then it's connecting the dots to Shay and I, and we can help to expand a little bit more. And then as companies get deeper, so let's say they have that conversation with City Colleges. City Colleges has an awesome team that's dedicated to working on this. And then the next step after that is launch the apprentice program, and then come back when you have questions to employers. I'm happy, and Shay is happy, to connect the dots to our HR managers, Accenture's technology managers, the people that oversee the apprentices on a day-to-day basis, to get really into the weeds, right? Tell me the exact responsibilities that somebody's working on, JavaScript, RPA, whatever. We can get into all those details. What worked well, what didn't work well. We are an open book even to our fiercest competitors, to just try to get more companies to test the waters and create more middle skill jobs, which is great for your company, even better for the community. Shay, anything
Thank you.
I know, Mike.
So we've got a pretty diverse, I think Molly posted, you could either raise your hand or post a question in the chat. I see Renita Goodwin asked, are your hiring managers, will they report to involved in the matching process? So basically, are the hiring managers involved in that matching process? And certainly this great question, thank you. And if somebody else has questions, please feel free to unmute or post it in the chat. We probably have about another 7 minutes of Q&A before we get into Manny's presentation. And then after Manny's presentation, we're going to have another discussion period.
Yeah. Shay, you want to take that one?
I would just say, our managers are, which I think is super helpful, and they go through different rounds of interviews with the apprentices, which I think is super helpful, especially when they're on board. I think managers are actually super key to the success of your program. If you have managers that are paired with an apprentice that they are not a fan of, or that they didn't get to see interact, I think it can breed bad ground. It's kind of like being handed and I don't want to say child in age, but, being handed a responsibility that you didn't necessarily sign up for. And so we actually do a volunteer process for our apprentices, for our managers, to see which managers, based on that line, want to become involved in the apprentice program. And then from there, during our interview days, managers are assigned to those that have applied to specific roles within the organization. So yes. And then Mike, anything from you on that end?
Yeah, I would say that our this is now the apprentice program is completely embedded in our HR process. So we have folks that recruit from four-year degrees candidates, they recruit from associate degree candidates, nonprofits, and everything else. And from an Accenture point of view, we have a small footprint in our back office, which is where we started, because back office IT is like a perfect place to start, because there's so many things in technology that are commoditized that you can, with a good base foundation of education, you can learn and be very productive from a back office point of view. Now, where you really strike a huge opportunity is in the bread and butter of your business. So for Aon, insurance, right? That's the bread and butter of their business. That's where a bulk of their apprentices are. The bread and butter of our business is client-facing technology work. That's like 60% of our global revenue of $50 billion last year. And that's where we have the highest number of apprentices off of there. And again, technology being commoditized, it's client-facing technology work, plugging in Salesforce, SAP, Oracle, Workday, etc., for clients and doing all those activities off of there. And I think that when we start to go through that recruiting process, we involve the folks that are hiring into those organizations, and then we actually even involve the client teams to allow them to come into the interview process to really make a really strong match for the folks that are going on to the programs off of there. Great question. What else? Questions are the best part of this.
I think there was a question from Tom
Yeah.
in there.
Yeah, do you work with community, city colleges and other community colleges on curriculum development? That's excellent. That's a good one for Aon. Go ahead.
Yeah, 100%, Tom. We do. I think, and Mike and I are on 2 panels today, so I can't remember which talking points I prepped them for. But yes, we work with city colleges to be able to align the classes that, and I think actually Susanna mentioned this, to align the classes, to the role that the apprentice will be going in, which I think is super helpful, again, for that applicable work. What they're learning in class, they're actually going to be applying it to what they're working on. Anything you want to add to that, Susanna?
Yeah, definitely. So for Aon, what they did with city colleges, they built I guess like classes that matches Aon's role. So we took a lot of insurance classes because Aon's a lot about insurance. So we did take some insurance classes to learn just the background of Aon's insurance. So another classes we did take was like management classes as well, because I feel that that's a very good soft skill to touch on. So management classes were as well part of the curriculum. And then they added like just a basic accounting class, because I feel that everyone should have some type of background in, especially in accounting. Like, let's say they touch base on managerial accounting, which is just very basic accounting. And then like I said, Aon's very big in insurance. So our curriculum was based off like insurance classes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd say on the Accenture side, I was pleasantly surprised when we did a deep dive on the technology curriculum. The only area that at the time we thought there needed to be some improvement, but not something that was a gigantic gap, it was something more in the long term, was around cybersecurity. So we dedicated a couple of folks to that were experts in cybersecurity to identify some areas that are marketable in the current world at that time, and then started to work with city colleges to help shore that gap. And they sure did, because they ended up creating a partnership with the Department of Defense to bring in their curriculum to add to city colleges to bolster the cybersecurity curriculum. So that they definitely closed that minor loop that we had pretty fast.
Yeah, and then just to add real quick too, like there was different roles within apprenticeship, which is insurance, and then the HR role. So the students who were in HR did in their second year of the program, they did take specific HR classes, and then insurance, we did take our specific insurance classes in our second year. And then, so yeah, like Aon works very close with city colleges and making sure that our curriculum was based on our role. Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Fantastic. Any last minute questions before we move on?
Smaller businesses have not necessarily engaged with city colleges' advice on how to engage them. Tom, I actually think a lot of small and mid-sized businesses have engaged with city colleges. Maybe I didn't connect the dots perfectly, but that program I talked about through the Chamber of Commerce, all of that was recruited directly out of city colleges. So a lot of those small and mid-sized apprenticeships that were created were through city colleges. So I think city colleges and the other community colleges that we work with are firing on all cylinders. And I think the thing that they need is more employers to be creative and open up their recruiting doors and create opportunities. I would love to see them sold out.
And I think that's a great way that our local workforce partners can help start that conversation with that local community college. If that small or mid-sized business doesn't know who to contact in that long directory at the community college, you know, that's where our local workforce services really has an opportunity to help, you know, bring those relationships together, right?
Yep.
So thank you for the great questions, keeping us on track. Next, we have a presentation from Manny Rodriguez. Manny is part of our Apprentice Illinois Youth and Pre-Apprenticeship Program Committee at the IWIB and works for Revolution Workshop. Manny, I believe you have a brief presentation you're going to share as well.
I was just going to talk a little bit about the Apprenticeship Committee. I want to thank you all for inviting me to present today. I want to give kudos. This is going to be a tough act to follow, Mike and Shay. You guys have a wonderful program, and it's, as a person that has been involved with setting up the apprenticeship framework for the entire state of Illinois, your model was the model we were looking at how to really do this effectively across all sectors. And Mike, I think you used the word mid-skills, and that's exactly what we have forgotten, right? We have forgotten what created the middle class in this country were these mid-skills, occupations, and career paths. And all too often, our folks, you know, you referenced this West and South Side, our underserved communities have been, you know, blocked from these opportunities, for, you know, lack of a better term. So again, just it's just the importance of your partnership and working with all of the different entities that help, everything from nonprofits to the education providers to the employers. That's what it really takes to build an effective apprenticeship pathway. You have to have that authentic, you know, partnership and relationship among those entities to really be able to provide the type of holistic services that you need when you're doing apprenticeship. For the purposes of this particular committee, I wanted to focus on our framework. You know, when we started this, I've been serving, I've had the pleasure of serving with several of you actually on this call, are part of the Apprenticeship Committee as well. All the way back when it was just a task force and we were trying to really determine how can we really, you know, look at apprenticeship as a viable way to, you know, providing, you know, real opportunity for our residents. And so we came up with a framework and 4 different main pillars of that framework. And it was youth apprenticeship, it was pre-apprenticeship, there was your traditional registered apprenticeship, and then your non-traditional apprenticeship or non-registered apprenticeship. And each of those, we built the framework on that model. And we created a system of navigators and intermediaries. Navigators being people that, like, if you were an employer and you were trying to figure out how apprenticeship could work for you, you now have a system or a network of people that can actually walk you through this. And again, you know, Mike and Shay, you guys at your particular companies have shown you know, leadership in your sectors, right? And beyond, to be honest, you guys have promoted apprenticeship beyond that. But that's the kind of stuff that you need. You need somebody to walk you through it, somebody that's been there and done it and understands the resources and then can connect you to the right folks. Think of the intermediary that we created. The intermediary is like the quarterback. You know, there's a person that's kind of got to make sure that all of the supply chain is met, right? From the recruitment piece and finding people, providing, you know, authentic pre-apprenticeship pathway into a authentic apprenticeship opportunity, setting that up, setting up the related technical instruction, setting up what the OJT looks like, on the job training looks like, all of that. The intermediary really acts as the quarterback among those different various partners within that, right? And so that was the system that we created. And after we created that system, we started to say, okay, let's break this up a little further. And we came up with working groups that basically were going to tackle how can we increase, again, these pathways and access to these pathways, and how do we support, again, business and nonprofit and everybody to create more opportunity. And in that, we originally had youth apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship in the same category. It was the same working group, but very quickly we pivoted, and Dr. Laz Lopez, who is actually the chair of the youth apprenticeship, of the youth working group, him and I decided to split the groups. So I chair the pre-apprenticeship working group, and he chairs the youth apprenticeship working group. And what we were then charged was to create a framework of best practice definitions, common definitions then that can be used across all state agencies, and then come out with a report that stated kind of like the top 5, top 6 barriers that were preventing groups, like, you know, on the youth side, we really focused on in-school youth. On the pre-apprenticeship side, we focused on out-of-school youth, returning citizens, again, what this committee is talking about, targeted populations. That was the whole point of breaking the two groups. They require different level of engagement and wraparound services, and the challenges are just, quite frankly, different. You know, one, you're dealing with the education system, and the other one, you're dealing with folks that may have, you know, a little bit harder barriers to employment. And how do you actually address those barriers so people are actually prepared and ready for the apprenticeship opportunity? And so we broke those up. The youth apprenticeship, and Sarah, or Molly, I'm gonna ask you guys, I have the documents in my possession. I would like you all, if you have not had the opportunity, I know some of you on this call are on the Apprenticeship Committee and have reviewed the report on the youth in particular. Dr. Laz Lopez and his working group created a report that had, again, 5 barriers and a list of recommendations that we think need to be addressed to be able to really, you know, blow up and expand youth apprenticeship in this state. And so, one, I would just say we need as much help as we can get and as many champions as we can get to make sure that these barriers are addressed. Some of them are kind of low hanging, and I think we've already accomplished some of them, but then there's others that require maybe legislation or, you know, something else. And so we do need your help. And if you're not familiar with it, I'm hoping Molly and Sarah, we can share that with the group, that report. On the pre-apprenticeship side, we are just at the phase of identifying the top 6 barriers. And so we have some of you on this call are part of my working group, and I want to thank you again. I always thank you know, my colleagues that do this work. You know, we're all doing it as a volunteer. We do it because we're very passionate. You know, Michael, I heard your passion. I love it. I think we need more of it, to be honest, because this is really how we're going to provide real economic opportunity. We want to stop violence. We want to break cycles of poverty. How do you do that? You provide real economic opportunity. That's how you have to do it. And that's what this whole goal is about. And so on the pre-apprenticeship side, we revised the pre-apprenticeship definition that was in the common, in the Pathways Dictionary. We have gotten that approved by the full IWIB. We are trying to make sure that it's in the Pathways Dictionary now, and that's been a little bit of a challenge, but I'm hoping we will get that in there. What we really tried to do was be broad. You know, I run a pre-apprenticeship. I'm founding executive director of Revolution Workshop. We run a pre-apprenticeship construction training program. Well, the construction sector is very different than, you know, the tech sector, the finance sector. It has its own set of warts. And so what we had to make sure what we did with this pre-apprenticeship definition was that we had to make sure it was flexible enough to go across all sectors, and that it still allowed for innovation, right, within the groups that were creating these different programs and pathways. And that's very important. But at the same time, making sure that there's quality, making sure that there's rigor, making sure that there's you know, the right wraparound
Sorry, everybody. It looks like Manny froze there for a second.
He was really on a roll too.
He was. That's good stuff. So, Molly, in addition, I always ask this is, Molly has put in the chat links to some of these documents. We will send a follow-up email out to everybody and include a hard copy, because I know if you're like me, the chat goes away, the link goes away, and all the resources go away. So I like being the email pack rat and being able to find it in my email. We will certainly pull those documents and get those out to everybody, along with the presentation, which has the links for both Aon and Accenture's program. I think what Manny was talking about is creating these wraparound services for pre-apprenticeship, right? I think that's a great opportunity to to look at how do we support youth that may not be ready to take that step of going to junior college. I know being in University Park on the south side of Chicago, right, recruiting from that area, there's definitely some challenges in how do we build people up so that they can take that next steps to maybe be that next supervisor, next leader, to create a true career pathway for people. And looks like Manny's still struggling to get back on. That's okay. But why don't we kind of turn it over to kind of some discussion in Q&A where we have the entire group. I'd love to hear other people unmute and just hear from the people presenting of, how can we collaborate among our different committees and the different workforce services and agencies that we represent to really promote apprenticeships and career pathways for opportunities and for the youth.
It also looks like Manny's back. Manny.
Sorry,
great.
Sorry about that. Internet went down in the office, so my apologies. I don't know where I was in the middle of the pre-apprenticeship piece.
No worry. Before we segue, you were just talking about wraparound services to support people via the pre-apprenticeships, Manny. So love for you to continue on that just a little bit more there.
Yeah, and I appreciate it. And again, my apologies. It's so critically important. Again, if we're going to target, for the purposes of this committee and your charge, pre-apprenticeship and youth apprenticeship they're necessary for us to properly prepare people for these opportunities. Again, the wraparound support services. You don't want, Mike and Shay don't want to have an employee that has to worry about childcare or has to worry about, housing, or has to worry about that they need to get a license or whatever the case is. That's why we need a pre-apprenticeship and youth apprenticeship model, so that we can, again, take care of some of those things that we don't want an individual to have to worry about when they're at the employer, right? We want that to be, they can focus and be successful on their career path, as opposed to everything else that's going on in their life. I think the other key piece that we've put in both youth apprenticeship and in pre-apprenticeship is the need for retention services, because it's not enough to say, hey, I'm going to take you and give you this opportunity, and now you're Michael and Shay's problem. That doesn't work. We have to be able to say, I'm going to keep being here for you, because life isn't going to stop happening just because you got a job. And so we are there. We do this with our model, and we're, again, promoting it as the pre-apprenticeship framework and youth, that we got to follow that apprentice through at least the first 2 years, because those are when we find that they drop and they're not successful because something happens. Maybe they lose their housing, right? You got them into some stable housing and then they lose it. Well, then now the worst case scenario is they lose it and now they lose their job, which happens so often. So you have to make sure that you stay with them and you're learning post-placement. And so those are things that we're really working on. And again, I've been wanting to talk to you all at this committee, in particular with the pre-apprenticeship side. And again, I know several of you are already on our working group, are currently creating the barriers to establishing pre-apprenticeship. And also, I'm going to turn off my video. Anyway, sorry guys, just having some internet problems. If you guys are but this is what we're trying to do right now, is create the same report that the youth apprenticeship working group created, so that we can have identified barriers and overall recommendations. And then we need everybody's help to get these recommendations, to fruition. So that's kind of it for now for me. I think Craig, Molly, Sarah, I don't know if you needed me to talk on any other spot, but that's
no, I think that's great, Manny. And what I shared is that if Molly and Sarah have those resources, or if you can get them over to Molly and Sarah, Molly's put a link to them, but I asked for them to share the electronic version of the documents, or put those links in the email follow up to this meeting, so that everybody has access to it. I think that's great work. As we move into our discussion Q&A, we're talking briefly about, just as Manny kind of had that call to action, right? How do we collaborate across the different committees and agencies to create awareness and promote apprenticeships and career pathway opportunities for youth? Does anybody have any suggestions, or is anybody doing something innovative in their area that they would like to talk about?
So Craig, this is Tony Furman. I have a general statement.
Okay.
So I think from the start of the Apprenticeship Marketing Committee, we have realized that the key to all this is the business community. In the last post-COVID, the term business culture and work culture, we're hearing more than we've ever heard in all the years before. I found it interesting, Michael made the comment about somebody coming in with their tie a little crooked or whatever, and that used to be a deal killer, that it's not anymore. I think businesses are realizing that to be successful, everybody can't look the same way. They can't be the same way. They need differing opinions and differing backgrounds. So I think it's key for all of us, the Business Engagement Committee, the Apprenticeship Committee, this group, to be able to be that spokespeople to go out to the business and sell diversity, to sell business culture. The companies that are not being successful recruiting are the ones that aren't embracing this.
No, I would agree with that. Great comments, Tony.
Very well said, Tony.
Yep. And really, I think that opportunity is for everybody on this meeting to share some of those stories and connect them with the subject matter experts that we have, to get them in the right place to answer those questions, so that we can break down those barriers, break down those stereotypes. I laugh because I was at a job fair 2 weeks ago when my generalist took a picture of me doing a dad moment, straightening somebody's tie and fixing their jacket for them, so they could make a good impression for other employers. That I didn't care about it, but I wanted to make sure that wasn't a barrier for this individual, right? I mean, that's real. Some people care, and unfortunately, we have to change that mindset for many, many more people out there. Any other suggestions, or again, what people are doing across the state to?
Yeah, Craig, this is Dave. I wanted to, it's really interesting to hear about the pre-apprenticeships. And this is both sort of an observation, but also I'm interested in feedback on this, which is, people with disabilities. I think also we've been talking on our work group about the need for a different on-ramp into the career pathways for people with disabilities, which seems very much related or similar to the kinds of things you're talking about in the pre-apprenticeships and with the wraparound services, whether it's things about transportation or accommodations or other things that are particular to people with disabilities. And I was first of all, just wanted to raise that so it was in people's consideration, but also mainly interested in how you guys have thought about that, or what sort of how that works into your pre-apprenticeship plans.
No, that's a great question. And I think it goes back to some of the same tenets we've been talking about, right? You have to, there does take a fair amount of employer education. We know this, right? For them to be convinced to take folks that they don't traditionally take. We know the population of people with disabilities is one of those. I will actually admit to you guys, I'm running a construction training program. And at first I was like, I didn't think that there was a good way for me to help folks with disabilities get into my pathway, right? Because in my sector, but I was so wrong. I was so wrong. I just need to say that straight out. I was just wrong. And once again, it comes back down to those wraparound supports. Once you know of the resources that are out there and you start to investigate that, there are a lot of resources out there. And there are best practice strategies that have been done all across our country, right? That target on each of these populations that we've been talking about. And when you put in that effort to kind of reach out and find that stuff, right? And really, what I've found is how often people are willing to just, pick up a phone and talk to you about what their experiences are and what they've been and how you can implement some of the things that they've done and wherever they're at and whatever sector they're serving to put it for yours. I'm proud that we've placed probably now 7 or 8 individuals with a variety of different disabilities. Everything from being on the spectrum, being autistic to, other physical disabilities are a little tougher, given that I'm in a very physical sector, but we have been able to do it. And I was glad that I was proven wrong. And it actually, I don't know if, I believe Michelle was on here. She was one of the people that I think really challenged me, right? And I think that's another thing. I think we need to be okay with challenging people on their traditional beliefs and getting them to think outside the box, right? Because that's important, right? And I'm very well intended in this work, right? I believe in this as my life's work. It's my life's mission to help people. But you saw what I was doing, just thinking I couldn't do it. And I didn't even open myself to the possibility, and I was wrong. And so it's conversation, it's sharing of best practice. It's, it's all of those, like working with employers that have already done this and have done it successfully, and then they become your champions. I mean, I just think that's key to this, right? It's relationship, it's selling, it's sharing.
I'd like to add something, Manny. You're right on. I think that one of the things that I forgot was that we have to meet people where they're at. And we have to be, it has to be human design designed based on what their typical disadvantage is. We have to start there. We can't just start with a program and say, this is going to work and try to plug people into these programs. A lot of it has to do with the support services. And there's all kinds of a whole plethora of other things, disadvantages and barriers that people have, but you got to start with where they're at. If you can take that mindset, and that's hard for the business people. I'm a business guy, right? I'm not an educator. I'm not a nonprofit guy. A business guy takes a hard-headed view of this. He says, okay, well, this is what I need. Let me go find those people, all right? Without thinking about, well, is it possible for me to find people that will do a good job at this, but maybe aren't the people that I'm used to considering because they don't fit my mold of what I think they ought to be. And so that's the hard transition, I think, but it's really important work. And I think the system is starting to get that. The other comment I wanted to make was that the chairs of the 4 Iowa committees get together regularly in their individual committee meetings back and forth. So we have an extraordinary level of communication, integration, and collaboration going on between apprenticeship, between CPTP, BC, and the CIC committees. Because we all know we're doing the same work, we're just taking different pieces of it. So there is the collaboration going on at a state level that's far superior to anything I saw 5 or 6 years ago. So it's really, really encouraging.
Yeah, Tom, I think you bring up a good point of meeting people where they are, and Manny, about wraparound services. And I think as a committee, as we have a lot of different agencies and service providers on here, we've got to recognize that if you're in the Chicagoland area, those wraparound services might be easier to get or more accessible in closer proximity as compared to if we're in Centralia or farther down south, or even in Dixon or out on the west side of the state. So that doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to identify how do we create those, right? Because people still need those services. So thank you for sharing that. The next question really goes to, and I think, Michael, you talked about this a little bit, about how the Chicago Apprenticeship Network can be replicated in other communities. You guys touched on, how you're doing it across the US, right? How many people Accenture has added, how many Aon has added, but then you have, that's your individual companies.
Mhm.
Can you talk to, the Chicagoland Apprentice Network? How does that get duplicated, right?
Yep. Yeah, and for sure, great question. And I think, and I love all the dialogue, and Manny, your passion and focus is spot on. I loved everything that you were saying. I think how the Chicago Apprentice Network gets replicated, which is effectively taking what companies in Chicago that have built apprentice programs have done and replicate that is in the works. So Shay went through the list. We launched in 2021 in Northern California, DC, Minnesota, Philadelphia, and Houston. That's 5. And then Boston in March. And then Detroit is going to be number 7 in July. And it's effectively taking the same model of, and I think everybody hit on a lot of notes that are exactly right. Meeting community colleges and nonprofits where they are at, taking the existing infrastructure that's really working well in markets that's underutilized, and creating opportunities. And really it's not just employers. We say this is an employer-led initiative, but employers can't do this all on their own. They need to connect to the talent sources, community colleges and nonprofits and other non-traditional recruiting sources that are going to be traditional. And then the third piece is actually where a lot of you fall into play on this: civic boards, networks, and organizations. How can we leverage your voices and your group's voices to amplify this message? Viable talent strategy balances social inequities. That's it. You want to hear more? Come talk to us, and come talk to Manny, and come talk to others. And then we will help to pitch this to decision makers, and then connecting to that existing infrastructure. So we're building that in every market. In those 7 markets, every market looks slightly different. The employers, you'll see a lot of familiar names. You'll see some names that you don't know of. The community colleges are all based, in the larger markets to start, like the larger cities, but it's expansive outside of the cities. And then, the organizations that we're partnering with, in Minnesota, we have Greater MSP. In Houston, we have the Greater Houston Partnership. In DC, we have FC2 and the Nova Chamber, the Northern Virginia Chamber. In Northern California, we have the Bay Area Council, and it's connecting with these existing entities instead of trying to create something from scratch. And then it's just thinking of things a little differently, and then connecting to the talent that is underutilized. And you think of this model has gone through a hot job market in 2017 up until COVID. You hit the brakes on hiring. Then you have the murder of George Floyd, which sparked so much of a fuel for companies to make an investment to balance social inequities. Here it is on a silver platter, and that's continued to grow through that. And then you have the Great Resignation, where employers can't find any talent. Guess what? I have 80,000 people at city colleges that are waiting for an opportunity. And there's just loads of talent that's out there. You just need to reimagine things a little differently. And we've done all the legwork. You just need employers to say yes. That makes sense?
Craig, do you
Does.
mind? I want to piggyback off what Michael's just said. Another thing that I want to highlight, and I don't know if it got cut off when I got frozen. I talked about our system of navigators and intermediaries, right? And I really think, you know, we have a decent website now, thanks to Tony Furman and his marketing working group. And Tony's been, you know, a strong leader in this work as well, and trying to get this. You know, we have a way for job seekers to come in and find out how to be an apprentice. We also have information and resources and tools for employers on that website. So I would, you know, strongly encourage people to use that website. It is user friendly. It is helpful. But then I also would encourage, again, if somebody's really trying to get more information about how to set up an apprenticeship, especially here in Illinois, again, we have a system of navigators that really, their whole job is to walk people through this, right? And identify the resources and make the matches so that people can create that kind of system.
I just wanted to jump in. LaDonna and Marcy have both had their hands raised. So I just wanted to point that out. Oops.
Nope, that's perfect, Molly. I was just about to go there. Thank you. So go ahead, Marcy. Why don't you start? Then we can move to LaDonna.
Sure. So, you know, I'm on this committee partly because I represent secondary, and I want to make sure that we keep in mind, I mean, what everybody's saying is the same thing, right? It's the communication piece. What I want us to make sure that we're aware of is that there's a lot of great work going on in a lot of different areas. And I think before we start thinking about, oh, this isn't happening, we need to be aware of, like Manny just shared, what is going on in all these different areas. And instead of creating something new, say, hey, I see that you're doing this. How can we support it? Like, for example, with the pre-apprenticeship, it's great, okay? But now the next step is, how do we help support the work that at a state that we're trying to get out, this group informing and supporting that work. So now we're building and we're making it more cohesive. We talk about the navigators, great navigators, but do they work with the school districts? Probably not, you know? And so like, we're trying to develop a coordinator that's going to work with the navigators or the new career coordinators that they're going to have, so that there is that cohesiveness. So I'm just throwing out, I want you all to keep in mind, I always keep saying there's a triangle, right? There's secondary, there's post-secondary, and there's business and industry. And if all three are not at the table, we've lost one of those legs. And so I just want to, I can't say it enough, and I just wanted to make sure I said that so that we all have that frame of mind.
No, Marcy, I think that's fantastic. And you bring up a good point, because how many times do we hear people reinventing the wheel, right? Because they don't know. And I think, you know, I had the pleasure of attending some IWIB meetings a couple of weeks ago. And I think I said to Tom Hacker or John Rico, you know, at some point here, we keep on talking to each other, right? How do we talk to everybody else who's not on the, so at some point we need to have a game plan to get this information out via social media, via chambers of commerce, so that people, to your point, Marcy, stop reinventing that wheel and go to the resources that Manny's team is creating. And I think slowly we're getting there. There's some work to be done, but no, great comments. LaDonna, you had some comments?
I did, and I just kind of want to piggyback on what David said, and Tom and Marcy and Manny. I'm really excited about this pre-apprenticeship, because we have been talking about helping people with disabilities, and there's a lot of other people that fall into this category, not just with disabilities, but other youth and people who are incarcerated, and just really people without disabilities who learn differently and, you know, need those wraparound services, either due to a generational low socioeconomic and not really knowing how to do all this, you know, but definitely want to and can get ahead, but they just might learn differently. And it's encouraging to me to hear somebody recognize those things. It's encouraging to hear that the system in Illinois is starting to hopefully kind of come around and see that there are many viable people who, again, just learn differently. And to also know, to let you guys know that there's a whole network of providers for people with disabilities and people who are coming out of incarceration that can help to do those wraparound services. And the problem that we've all run into, that I, as one of those providers, is the funding for that. People the funders seem to spend a whole lot of time trying to find ways not to fund things rather than to fund ways, and not recognize that this really is where we need to go, in the future. And so I really want to stay engaged with you and kind of maybe help. There is a facility advisory council meeting that occurs with all of these facilities throughout the whole state that I think at some point would be really good for, maybe you to attend and, kind of discuss some of these things. So I won't take up any more of your time, but it is very heartening, and thank you.
Paul Thompson, you had your hand raised. Do you have a comment?
I do. Thank you. And hello, everyone. I'm running a an employment social enterprise here in Chicago, focused specifically on opportunity youth, 18 to 26, folks who are on the south and west sides of Chicago in challenged and distressed communities. And the one thing that I want to be sure that we point out here is we talk about wraparound services in a very holistic way, but there is a deeper need and increased need for trauma-informed practices. And I can't stress that enough. Everybody who has been through the pandemic, believe me, you have experienced trauma in one form or another. And your ability to make a phone call and get counseling services, or just lean on a friend, phone a friend, may be completely different than the populations that we're talking about, who are under-resourced, who don't have stakeholders who are supporting them and pushing them forward. So it is super important to think about the mental health of this population that we're trying to employ as well. And remember, culturally and historically, Black and brown people do not access mental health services. There's a huge stigma around that. So in order to get people to really sort of adapt some of this thing, there's some trust building and things like that that have to happen. I'll put a quick plug in for the Chicago Resiliency Network, which is an initiative that's being put together by the corporate coalition. Brian Fabes and the work that he's doing in Chicago is pushing a lot of this content and understanding out to corporations. This is something that needs to be present both in the apprenticeship, dealing with the population, as well as a target company, so that the managers and the environment is not set up in a way that's going to trigger people or to have them feel uncomfortable, unwanted, or not belonging. And I know those are a whole lot of things, but I'll pause there and thank you.
No, Paul, thank you so much for your comments. I think those are well taken. Clearly, guys, an energetic meeting, a lot of great discussion here, and we appreciate that.
Oops, it looks like we might have just lost Craig for a second. Are you
Yeah,
back?
I did, and I'm back. It
Okay,
booted
awesome.
me out and kicked me back in.
Oh, weird.
So, what I was saying is that a lot of great conversation. I think the opportunity again is for as a group for us to talk about ideas of how do we get this message out to a larger audience, right? great work that Michael and Shay are doing in the immediate Chicagoland region, but I often talk, even locally, Will County, how many people are, when you think about all the businesses truly interacting with these systems, how do we raise that general level of business awareness? And I think it's through, not just looking at single channels, but looking at every channel, right? And how do we do that? I think at this point, we can move to public comment. I don't know if there's any public on the announcement on the line.
So Craig, can I follow up on Marcy's comments and just very quickly talk about what the Apprenticeship Marketing Committee has done and what we're doing? Manny mentioned that we refurbished the website. Currently, both the Youth Apprenticeship Committee and the Pre-Apprenticeship Group are working on their landing pages. So I think that would be a good place for Marcy, for some of the things that are going on, to try to connect in, because that has become sort of the central place for people when they're looking for apprenticeships information in the state. I know Kim's on, she can talk to the number of inquiries that we receive on a weekly basis. In addition, we've started a pretty substantial social media campaign. We have both a LinkedIn site, which has over 500 followers now. So if anybody has any information on apprenticeship programs throughout the state that they would like to share, we can get that on LinkedIn. Our current conversation, both about the webpage and also social media, is developing some short little videos that we can share about successful apprenticeship programs throughout the state. And we've been having conversations, dare I say, about creating a TikTok page for the Apprenticeship Marketing Group and getting information out to people where they are looking now. So any ideas that people have, or we're always looking for new ideas and new things to share on the apprenticeship website and our social media. So please reach out to us. The Apprenticeship Marketing Group meets the first Thursday at 2 o'clock of each month. If you're interested, we can get you the information. Very interested in how we can have the conversation with the Chicago Apprenticeship Network, how we can take that model and tweak it for some of the more rural areas in Illinois. Because I hate to tell you this, when you talk Chicago, sometimes people downstate don't see that as a positive, guys. Sorry. So I would love to have that conversation, Michael, with taking that framework and how do we, like I say, tweak it to more rural areas or to a bigger region to make that work.
The good news is this framework is already in Bloomington and Peoria. I'm ready. And I went to school in Champaign. I'm ready to tour the state.
Sounds good. We need to have you come down to Southwestern Illinois. So
exactly, where it's a little even more, Peoria and Champaign are huge metropolises, right, Tony?
Yep. Yeah.
So
happy to help and happy to spread the word.
Great.
That's
we
fantastic.
Will be reaching out, Michael.
And I'm excited, Tony, to see you in your first TikTok. I mean, that's something that I'm sure will get spread like wildfire. So
we've already done them locally here. We've done a few when we were doing some outreach, and Tony's not in any of the TikToks. Okay. I don't think I'm the selling point for any of these programs. Thanks.
So any other public comment before we wrap up? Hearing none, again, our next committee meeting, quarterly meeting, is on September 29th. It will feature the Kiwani reentry program, along with some partnerships with the employers. We really appreciate the conversation and the number of people that attended today's meeting. I think this is a great model of kind of inviting a larger group, because there is a lot of overlap. We want to make sure that we're not reinventing the wheel and duplicating what somebody else is doing, but doing work side by side and moving the agenda along all these topics. So thank you, everybody. It's now noon. I hope everybody has a very safe and healthy 4th of July, and we'll be talking to you soon.
Thank you all. Great meeting.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.